Senator, thank you for being here with me today. Let's talk about Senate Bill 1026. If I'm not mistaken, the governor mentioned this in his State of the State address. What would this law specifically change relating to the Attorney General?
He did. We were glad to have the governor's support on this. So, since 1951, the Attorney General's office has had concurrent jurisdiction with local district attorneys with regard to election crimes. Sometimes the DA may have a conflict because the election might involve him or his same voters or someone else that he works closely with. And so, since 1951, recognizing that, the Attorney General has had the authority to come in and look at election crimes. But for some reason, in 2021, the Court of Criminal Appeals, out of nowhere, blocked that statute and said the Attorney General cannot investigate election crimes unless invited in by the district attorney. Of course, we have great district attorneys where we live, but around the state, there are some places where the district attorney is not interested in investigating election crimes. And if they don't want to investigate the case, they're not interested in asking the Attorney General either. So election crimes in some of our biggest counties are just not being investigated and they're not being prosecuted. I don't have to tell you, if the law is not being enforced, nobody can trust the results of those elections. So Senate Bill 1026 says we are going to give this authority back to the Attorney General where it was since 1951. This was a bizarre ruling by the Court of Criminal Appeals, which, as you know, is Texas' highest court for criminal cases. And so we believe they got this wrong and we need to fix it. And so this bill will give that authority back to the Attorney General.
Yeah, I know you've talked about the Stevens case a little bit. Can you tell us a bit about that case for some of our audience who may be unaware?
You bet. The Stevens case was a prosecution of an election crime. It was handled by the district attorney's office, just like so many cases since 1951. The defendant in that case appealed, and one of the things they appealed on was whether the Attorney General had authority to bring the case. And so the Court of Criminal Appeals in Texas said, yeah, that's right. The Attorney General should not have brought this case because of the separation of powers. It was an unusual application of the separation of powers. But as of today, they're still the highest court in the land on criminal cases. Now, the legislature is looking at making some changes to that to make sure that the Texas Constitution is being interpreted properly. But that's what happened. So the Court of Criminal Appeals ruled that the Attorney General of Texas, even though this has been done for 70 years, the Court of Criminal Appeals, for some reason, ruled that the AG had no authority to prosecute that case.
Have you talked to Attorney General Ken Paxton about this bill? Has he told you, his thoughts on the bill?
Yes, we've spoken to him. We've spoken to many members of his team. Believe it or not, Michael, just this afternoon, a few minutes ago, we were conducting the hearing for the State Affairs Committee and Senate Bill 1026. We presented that to the committee. We heard testimony, and we heard the top election fraud prosecution attorney from the Attorney General's office talk about this bill. The Attorney General has spoken about it, of course, the governor, as you say. And some folks are trying to make this sound like some radical change we're making. We are restoring what the law has been since at least 1951. We are trying to repair the damage done by a wrong court ruling. That's the bottom line.
Now let's go, deeper into that. If this were to pass, what impact do you feel it would have?
Well, in our big urban counties in Texas, where there are a lot of reports of election crimes, there'd be some accountability. Because today, if you're in a major urban county in Texas, most of those district attorneys are not interested in prosecuting election crimes. So the message to you or to anyone who wants to cheat is, I can cheat in this election, I can break the law, and I'm not going to be held accountable. Now, you know that all of us need accountability. Knowing the police are there, knowing the district attorney is there, that helps remind us all to follow the law. And in many places in Texas today, without this law, there's no enforcement of the election law. So we have to have this.
What are you hearing from urban areas regarding those election law violations?
We've had testimony from folks all across the state in previous sessions and today about this bill. And there's a concern, especially for folks living in those urban areas where the law is just not being enforced. So we need to get this passed.
But do you have, was there like a specific testimony or, specific cases of election law being violated that stood out to you?
We've heard cases over the years, we've had sworn testimony about the law being violated. And so if there's not someone in charge of enforcing that, we have a real problem. There's been testimony about someone claiming to be assisting a voter in the ballot box, but in fact, they're voting in the place of the voter. Many times, the victims of these crimes are first-time voters, or they're folks who don't speak English so well, or they're elderly voters, or they're voters with disabilities. These people are the most vulnerable to these paid election workers who come in and try to steal their votes, try to really overcome that voter's will and vote on their behalf without them even knowing it's happening. So this is real. And again, it's happening to the most vulnerable people, And right now, there's no way to protect them.
And we're getting to that point in the session where votes are starting to come up on bills. How confident are you this will pass the Senate and then eventually, the House? What are your thoughts on that?
Folks realize how important this is. We obviously have our work to do to convince members of the Senate to vote for it, but there's strong support. So we're optimistic this is going to get passed. We also have 3 or 4 other bills in addition to 1026 that we'll be rolling out over the next couple of days to make sure that we have someone prosecuting these election crimes when the district attorney, especially in a big urban area, refuses to do it.
Last thing, are you changing the penalties for these election crimes or just making it so the attorney general can prosecute them?
Senate Bill 1026 just makes it where the attorney general can prosecute. There are other bills being considered that would raise penalties and make other changes, but this bill is just about having someone to enforce the law.